U.S. President Donald Trump says he has spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin in an exclusive interview with the New York Post. Trump said that he better not say how many times he had spoken with Putin, but touted a good relationship with his Russian counterpart. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has declined to confirm or even deny the phone call. It was not immediately clear when the leaders spoke or if they had spoken since Trump took office in January. The U.S. president, who had previously vowed to end the Russia-Ukraine war within 24 hours of assuming office, expressed hope that the war in Ukraine will end fast, saying that Putin also wants to see people stop dying. During the interview, which took place aboard Air Force One, the president directed his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, to get these meetings going. Trump has said earlier this week that talks to end the war had made a lot of progress. On Friday, Trump told reporters that he would probably meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the upcoming week. He had also hinted that he planned to talk to Putin.
We'll be meeting with President Zelensky next week, and I will probably be talking to President Putin. I'd like to see that war end for one primary reason. They're killing so many people. You're losing millions of people on a battlefield. In this case, mostly the battlefield. You have 800,000 or 900,000 Russian soldiers are dead and very badly wounded, and the same thing with Ukraine. You have probably 700,000 with Ukraine. The numbers they gave are a little bit lower than that, but I believe those numbers aren't correct. I'd like to see it end just on a human basis. It's terrible what's going on. They have open fields with no protection. The only thing a bullet can hit is a human body, and the human body dies as soon as it gets hit. Now, I'd like to see that end.
Zelensky is expected to lead Ukraine's delegation at the Munich Security Conference, which U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and U.S.'s Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, are scheduled to attend. However, Trump will not be attending the conference. Earlier this week, Trump said that he wants to secure access to Ukraine's supply of rare earth minerals in exchange for continued U.S. assistance to Ukraine. Responding to Trump's statement, the president of Ukraine said that he was ready for a deal with the U.S. of its rare earth minerals. During an interview, the Ukrainian president unfurled a map showing several sites of its rare mineral resources, which are currently occupied by Russia in the eastern region. Now, according to Zelensky, less than 20%, including half of Ukraine's mineral resources, are in the Russian territory.
These deposits are priceless. It is huge amounts of money, huge. That is why we need to protect it. So if we are talking about a deal, that's what the Americans want, then let's do a deal. We are only for it. Let's do the deal.
Zelensky also emphasized that Kyiv is not giving away its resources, while adding that they are in talks with Washington to store U.S. liquefied natural gas in its massive underground gas storage sites. Giorgio Cafiero is the CEO of Gulf State Analytics and professor at Georgetown University. Professor Cafiero is now joining us live from D.C. Good to see you, Professor. I don't know. Why do you think the Kremlin is keeping mum on these talks between Trump and Vladimir Putin? Because they're not saying anything.
Thank you. Good to be on your program. It might be the case that later on the Kremlin will confirm that talks happened. I'm assuming that there has been some sort of communication through some channel between Trump administration and the Kremlin. The number of times Trump and Putin have spoken since January 20th, I do not know. Obviously, that's not public information right now. But it's going to, the optics are going to be very important. And I think probably the Kremlin will go to pains to try to present these talks in a certain manner that depicts Russia as being in a position of strength. And it might be at some point soon that the Kremlin will go ahead and confirm that these talks happened, of course, assuming that they did, which seems to be the case.
Professor Cafiero, if indeed these talks do happen, what do you foresee happening at the talks between Trump and Putin? Because do you foresee peace talks or do you foresee deal talks? And by deal talks, I mean Trump has already indicated that he's interested in the mineral resources in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, obviously Trump does have these interests in rare earths in Ukraine. That's obvious. In terms of the future of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, what is possible at best is a freezing of the Ukrainian war, not any, resolution of the conflict, just a freezing of the conflict. While Trump, as a candidate, said he was going to achieve that outcome within 24 hours, we obviously know that that was entirely unrealistic. I think Trump genuinely does want to freeze this war. I think from his perspective, the conflict is a huge irritant, kind of a headache. He would like to move past it. The point to appreciate, though, is that the negotiations might not necessarily wrap up very quickly. Let's keep in mind that while the U.S. sanctions have had a negative effect on Russia, the Russian economy did not collapse. At the same time, on the ground in Ukraine, Russia does have the upper hand. And at a time in which the Trump administration is talking about cutting off arms supplies to the Ukrainian side, Moscow might see this as an opportunity to kind of push ahead and achieve more gains on the ground militarily. So it's not going to necessarily be very easy for the Trump administration to quickly negotiate a freezing of the conflict with Russia. I think it can happen, but this might be a process that takes longer than some observers would potentially assume.
Professor Giorgio Cafiero, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.